I just wanted to go over our first assignment for anybody who wasn't in class the first day. All we did was just review data types because that's kind of the building blocks of our programming language in Python. That's what we're going to be working with. We're going to be working with integers, strings, floats, lists, and then I also went over some operations. So all we did was just create simple variables and we used letters. Remember, you can't have a variable named with a number. If I did that and I ran this, I'd get an error right away because that's breaking syntax rules. Variables must start with a letter. So I'll put that back to be H, and also to indicate strings, we put quotes on them. That's why even though this is the number 15, it's considered a string. We can't add it together. We can't do math with a string. We can display a string, the number 15, just like you could an address or your age or anything like that, but we can't really do math with it when it has the quotes around it, which indicates a string. And regular letters are not a string. So if you just put something here like the word string, it would be looking for, even if I ran this, it would be looking for something. It's saying string is not defined, because when it doesn't see quotes and it just sees a word, Python thinks that it's a variable, and it's not a variable. So without quotes, it's a variable, but we're not using it right now, so we have to assign a variable, and that's what we did to start off here in Repl.it. What we did is we assigned variables. We're not really saying equals. We're saying this represents the data value of 15. B represents the value of the string data 15. This is a float, 15.0 with a decimal. That's called a float, a floating point integer. And these are just comments here that have the hashtag in front of them. And I just kind of tab them over. And also when we do division in Python Python 3 or higher, any kind of division becomes a float, no matter what it is, even if it has a decimal or not. So even if it's 4 divided by 2, it's considered a float. It won't just say 2 when it figures that out. If I print out something, and here's a built-in function called print, which is really easy to use, and if I just put print f, and f is what represents that number, if I run that, you can see it's going to be 2.0, so that it'll actually make a float because we're doing division. So this is division. If I printed out e and I ran it, it's going to give me a long decimal like that. So that's what I mean by floats. A list, we'll talk about lists later, but lists are denoted by square brackets, and you could put numbers in here, you could put strings in there, you could put variables in there, you could put all kinds of things in there. And again, this just means that this variable represents this particular value. Now we have some other operators here. We have 2 slashes here. It's like division, except there's 2 of them. If I print out G, that's called floor division. And what that'll do is that will return how many times the second number goes into the first number, or how many times the first number can be divided by without a remainder. So if you did 4 divided by 3, 3 could only go into 4 one time. There would be a remainder, but we're not worried about the remainder with floor division. It's just how many times it goes into there. So the same would be if it was 4 or 3 would be the same, because 4 could go in there one time and 3 can go in there one time. 2 would go in there twice. So that's floor division. So if I printed out G here, we got 1, and even if I made 4 and I printed that out, I'd get the same answer because they only go in there one time. That's called floor division. Now this one with a percent here, which is like a modulus, they call that a modulus, and it's 4% 3, and what that means is it'll only give you the remainder. So 3 will go into 4 one time, and the remainder would be 1, and that should be 1 as well. So if I go in here and print out H, when I use the modulus, I get 1 again. And just to change this up, so we know here, if I did 3 would go into 5 once, and there should be a remainder of 2. So let's just make sure that works. Okay, so that's fine. So we're going to use that for another little exercise where we convert RGB values into hex, because these kind of work for that. Now, another thing I just want to point out here, that we can show the type of these data values as well. So if I want to print out, well, actually the function is called type, and if I want to see the type, and just to make sure that 15 is an integer, I could put A in there because A represents that. Now if I print it out now, it doesn't do anything because it's just returning it, but it's not printing it out. I would actually have to put print and wrap this around like that. So I have to make sure these parentheses wrap around the function that's going to display the type of A. So there's two functions, and there's like a function inside a function, and these are built-in Python functions. So if I run this, it should say like class int, and let's just make sure it does after the two. And then if I did B, I could just copy these, and just to make sure that I'm correct here, just because they're there doesn't mean they're right. So if I did B with the quotes there, that should come out as a string, and there it's saying str. And then you could try all these out and just see what they do. Again, it's not real exciting. It's just reference for yourself, so we're familiar with data types. And there's a float. The next one should be a list, and so on. Now that I have all these print statements over here, I could print these out. Now, I don't need to print out this H again. That's just going to say 2, so I'll get rid of that. And we're just looking at types, and we could go through and look at all the types and make sure they match up to what we have here. So when I print these out, let's just make sure what we get here, because we didn't talk about what values these would be or what kind of data types G and H would be, but when we print these out, we can match them up and see that we have int, string, float, list. That's what's showing up over here in my output. And then it says float, float, and that's what we were figuring for division for Python 3. And then it's saying int, int. So both of these are just doing an integer, since they can't have any decimals anyway because they're not meant to, because it's floor division, so that's an int. And then also the modulus where it's giving us a remainder, that will not be a decimal. So that's coming out as an int as well. So that's good to know that that's going to be an integer if we have to use it for anything else. So, and we are going to do a little challenge to make you think a little bit, converting RGB values, just one single RGB value from 0 to 255, and we're going to convert that to hex values, which actually uses a 16s place and a 1s place. Now, we're not going to use letters because they only use one value, they use letters, but we're going to do that on the next challenge. So that's our little introduction here of data types. So we'll move on and do some more things.